That's the number one thing, is just looking at the line items, cost cutting, consolidating tech. The second thing is, because these businesses are also affected with the downturn, as you focus on a few priorities, one of the things that gets put on the back burner is new integrations, new technologies, new launches. It becomes a protecting the core.
Yeah, it makes tons of sense. Welcome back to the SaaS Sales Performance Podcast, where we sit down with the boldest thinkers and the most dynamic leaders shaping the future of revenue and performance. Today's guest is someone who brings a truly unique perspective to that topic, to the topic of leadership, transformation, but also high performance. Today's guest is Tanvir Bhangoo. From the locker room to the boardroom, Tanvir's journey is nothing short of remarkable. Tanvir is a former college football player turned commercial leader, and Tanvir now helps organizations unlock elite performance under pressure by applying some of the principles from sport to business. So Tanvir is also the author of the best-selling book, The Pro Business Mindset. He's a keynote speaker and the founder of TBX Digital, where Tanvir specializes in working with Fortune 500 companies and startups alike to help accelerate their build of their enterprise market and transform their businesses through digital transformation. So in today's episode, we're going to explore what can sales teams learn from sports about mindset, preparation, and grit. You don't want to miss this one, so let's get right into it. Tanvir, huge welcome onto the show, and really looking forward to today's conversation, which is obviously a topic that's close to my heart as well as yours, as two former athletes. But Tanvir, it's great to have you on the show, and welcome on.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you having me on the show. We connected a few weeks back in person, so I'm glad we're doing this again. And I think our chat earlier was pretty, I would say, it included a lot of different topics from sports, business. And I think just to build on that, I think people are going to get a good conversation today as we dive into some of these topics. So I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Really looking forward to continuing where we left off in Boston. Yeah, I've left the sort of chilly Boston spring to return to the chilly and colder London spring. So can't get away from that. It's a really, Tanvir, you and I are recording this in, beginning of Q2 2025. We're kind of mid-April now. It's a pretty interesting market, to say the least. The macro instability really kind of continues or accelerates. And as we think about the topic for today's conversation of the importance of mindset and grit, I think it's fair to say that a lot of that is more important now than it's ever been, right?
Absolutely. When I look at the market today, I actually had a newsletter a few weeks ago that I published. One of the things I talked about there, Matt, was how certain things start to happen in these kinds of situations. And most of the time, the solution, if you kind of look at the root cause of any of these situations, especially from a sales organization, if you're revenue driving leadership, is to focus on the foundational elements. What happens is we start to accelerate things that we've been doing. We start to go more outbound. We'll start to really hammer home some of our let's say, in pipeline deals, and let's do more demos. Let's go meet their team. When in fact, you take a step back and just kind of think about, hey, where are we today? What can we do different, or what can we double down on? And what are some of the things that we should stop doing? A lot of people don't do that. And that's where I think, if you think about sports, there's a thing called the training camp that we have the luxury of doing. Let's say in football. So when I played football for 5 years in college, the training camp was where our coach would say, this is where you win the championship. It's not in the championship. It's in the earlier foundational moments. So I think of this whenever things get tough or uncertain. I think of like hunker down, but look at your foundation. Have a mini training camp to set yourself up for the next 6 months, 12 months, whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening. So you see a lot of teams spend their wheels. I don't know, love your thoughts as well. I know you're working with a lot of teams on the revenue, on the sales side as well, particularly helping them. Curious to see if you're seeing that as well and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think you used the word there, pause. And I would say in the last 2 weeks, I've heard that word used a hell of a lot by revenue leaders in particular. So it feels like, in a way, it's kind of a shame because there was a lot of optimism heading into Q1. And I think, particularly a lot of software businesses that we work with had really good Q1s, good start to the year. And now there's been obviously this bump in the road. A lot of leadership, a lot of leaders that I'm speaking to are considering or thinking about this period of, maybe let's just hit pause on a few things. And like you said, like, whether it's going back to training camp or, kind of just making sure that the foundations really are stable. I think the other thing I'd add on to that is there's still, I think, quite a lot of scar tissue from that 2022, 2023 period where lots of businesses, scaled incredibly quickly when interest rates were really low and capital was cheap. And they maybe, were a little bit too aggressive on decisions around, say, hiring or go to market. So I think there's still some scar tissue there. I think people don't want to make the same mistakes twice. And I think a lot of people are also thinking, they may have made ICP changes in the last 12 months and they're questioning whether there is genuine product market fit. And, maybe we can talk about that move up market into enterprise, right? Because I think a lot of organizations have started to do that, but now they're thinking, oh, hang on, let's just pause and reassess. Does the data suggest that, we've actually got a foothold here?
Yeah, that's a really packed question and observation. When you start going up market, Matt, especially in these kinds of times, let's say you're a company who's already going up market, you were having some traction, and the tariffs and the potential economic downturn kind of looming out there. What will happen is the enterprise customers, most of enterprise customers, I would classify as large brands, the legacy brands, even some large tech companies. What will happen is they will pause any new purchases unless it's crucial to the operations. So if you already got a pipeline in enterprise that's 6 to 12 months or even 24 months long, and you've already got an actual pipeline or sales cycle that is 24 months long, but a pipeline that, let's say, it's 10 accounts, what will happen is that sales cycle is not going to get longer because you've paused, your prospects have paused the buying behavior. But at the same time, your pipeline is going to shrink. And so now you're basically dealing with you got to forecast a smaller pipeline and a revenue recognition or, going live or live revenue is going to take that much longer. That is considering that you can still close the same amount of deals that you otherwise would have. So I think what has to happen here is, instead of shooting with a shotgun, you gotta go to a sniper or a rifle and really work with the deals and the people that you believe are truly going to close. And that, in your comment about product market fit is understand where can you really help this prospect versus where were you kind of a fit, but you would have had to do a lot of work anyways. Perhaps you should also pause that internally as well, because it's just going to take time and resources and you're going to burn cash while doing so. So there's a few observations that I'm noticing as this happens, right?
Makes a ton of sense. Reach for the sniper rifle rather than the broader shotgun approach. Makes tons of sense. You mentioned two things that you're seeing happen there. Sales cycle lengths extend because of this pause that we just discussed, which I completely understand. That makes tons of sense. You also mentioned that pipelines are likely to have shrunk. What's causing that, do you think? Is that just a case that customers are putting things on pause, therefore those opportunities are dropping out your pipeline?
The biggest thing that'll happen is the CFO is going to look at the budget and say, today, this is what we're spending on all the departments. And then comes, IT, because, it's still old school, but you still got IT departments. In IT, you're looking at, hey, what are all of these different line items that our teams, our CTO is paying for across the business? And then the first thing the CFO is going to ask is, what can you stop paying for? Second is, what can you consolidate? And you pause any new purchases. So now if you were selling a product that was something that somebody else already offers, but it's not as great as yours, there's going to absolutely be a question on the legacy brand side or on the CFO side that, hey, is there something that the vendor you already have can do, or is there some custom work they can do to provide us this, which is cheaper and faster, versus having to go and close this new vendor and then do all the integration again. So that's the number one thing, is just looking at the line items, cost cutting, consolidating tech. The second thing is, because these businesses are also affected with the downturn, as you focus on a few priorities, one of the things that gets put on the back burner is new integrations, new technologies, new launches. It becomes protecting the core. So as a result, the downstream impact of that is that your pipeline, if you had 12 counts, you're only going to be left with maybe 6. Unless you're in a business that is actually does not get affected by any of these things, which is minimal.
Yeah, it makes tons of sense. I met with a business this week who they sell insurance technology to the world's biggest insurance firms. So, they're selling a really complex solution to really limited TAM. There's only you could almost count the number of companies that they could sell to, right? How, like, and the CRO was pretty open and honest, right? In terms of like the expectations for growth haven't necessarily changed from the board and the investors, but all of these macro factors are for sure influencing sales cycles and pipelines. So how do you balance that? Because the classic challenge I see is, board and CEO pressure of faster, faster, faster. Enterprise sales cycles are long, right? These things take time. You've got to multi-thread so many stakeholders. Like, how do you balance that pressure?
Well, talking about training camp or foundations, right? If you're working with a C-suite that is not used to the enterprise space, it doesn't matter which economic time you're in, whether it's great like it was in the past few years or pre-COVID, or it's now, the C-suite team will still have questions about, hey, why are you not closing more deals? Why can't you close these faster? Why do we have to invest so much money? Why is support always so high? Why does everything have to be custom? There's always going to be this question. So I would say that as a leader in the enterprise space, you should always be over communicating these things to your board and C-suite anyways. That, hey, this is enterprise. It's hard. It takes long. We should not measure this business and the same metrics and P&L that the core business has if you are going up market. Or, hey, you should not measure this business as you had in previous roles if somebody is coming from a more B2C or SMB focused tech business. That's the number one thing, is just setting expectations. Now, when these things happen, again, I always go back to the basics. Get a meeting together with your boards, get ahead with the board and your leadership team, get ahead of it and explain, hey, here is what we're seeing. Here's the impact. Here's what our plan was. And this is considering that you had a great plan already, because a lot of plans are actually overstated. We'll get into them later if you have time. Hey, this is what we're seeing. We might need to change some of our forecasts, some of our outlook, and here is why. And if we can do these three things, we're probably going to be okay. And then show the impact, show the numbers, show the financials behind that. A lot of times what will happen is people will wait until it's too late, until the deals in your pipeline, like, yeah, we're going to close, but they never close. And it's Q4 and you're supposed to win 4 logos. Now you're only winning 1. That's when it's, I think people don't like surprises. So I always coach people that, hey, get ahead of it now and be upfront about it so that you can at least make some decisions to get through the tough times so that when you're through the other side and you survive, you can accelerate performance later on and actually be in a position to make gains much bigger than you otherwise would be able to.
Yeah, that's super insightful. It's you spoke there about the overstating the plan in the first place. A particular challenge we see, as you mentioned, for maybe C-suite teams that are trying to make that step up into enterprise for the first time. Perhaps just to like loop it round back into the sports analogy, like when you set yourself unrealistic objectives at the beginning of a season, you can lose the confidence and morale pretty quickly of the team.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm curious, you played sports as well. Is there a story or some instance that you remember where possibly, Matt, you guys as a team or your coaches showed you what I call the promised lands too early, and then you lost your morale? Or it was the other way around, where they said, hey, it's going to take us a few years to get there, and we just got to make sure that we don't get disheartened along the way because we are going to lose a few games. I don't know, curious for your thoughts.
I obviously played a lot of golf, right? Yeah. Which is an individual sport, but it is also a team sport because, you're playing on like the college team, you're playing, national teams, etc. Golf fundamentally, I don't know if you caught any of the Masters over the weekend, but I loved the quote from Rory McIlroy where he said, the way that you keep bouncing back from those setbacks is to be successful, you have to be an eternal optimist. And I just thought like that's such a great mindset to take into not only sports, but career, business. I think in my experience, it's managing how you overcome those setbacks on the journey without losing that vision of where you're trying to get to. But I think if you focus on trying to get to the outcome too quickly and you're expecting to get there immediately, then, you're very quickly going to lose your way. And I think that's true in business as well. Like when you're super 100%. Desperate to close the deal, you're kind of forcing the outcome rather than focusing on process and the execution that's going to get you there.
Yeah. I think you hit it on the head. A few examples or a few stories of this. As you mentioned earlier, I played college football in Canada. For any Americans listening or watching, it's 3 downs, 12 people, and the field is wider and longer, right? And a few changes, but otherwise it's very similar, right? So I was a nose tackle, much bigger than I am now. Anyhow, in our first year, I knew and the coach knew and we all knew that we were just rebuilding the team. Not ever once did any of the coaches say, hey, we are going to win the national championship? It's called the Vanier Cup. Not ever did they say, hey, this team, our goal is to win the Vanier Cup. Ever. Even we did win the championship. Even in the fourth year, they never brought it up even once. And what they instead did was show up to practice, put in the work. Although, what are the three things that we had a board in the locker room, and every practice you would say, what's one thing I'm going to get better at individually? You would put it up on the board so you hold each other accountable. And then first year, so and so. Second year, you got better. Third year, got better. Fourth year, won the championship. Then we went again. My fifth year, I went back for 50. I didn't get drafted. We had a 21 game win streak, the longest in the history of the league. Just building off of that. But that started 5 years earlier, and it was all about put in the work, put in the process. What are the things you can control? Don't even look at the scoreboard. And sometimes we'd be up, 50-0 in our fourth year. The message at halftime would be, forget about the score, go out there and do the best you can on the next play, right? Because then what happens is if you think you're good and you're winning, you get complacent. Somebody will beat you, right?
You lose your way very quickly.
Yeah.
It almost feels to me like whether you're selling SMB, mid-market or enterprise, it's kind of like they're different sports, and like the skills and the mindset that you need for an SMB sale is really, really different, right?
Yeah.
What it takes to close six-figure enterprise, 6-7-figure enterprise deals. But the mindset and the mentality, like that elite mindset you just talked us through there, it feels like, when you meet like a real high performing enterprise seller, you can just tell that they've got that kind of similar elite mindset that the top sports people have. You can kind of see it oozing out of them, right?
You know what's a great sign of this, Matt? I don't know if you've noticed as you work with these teams. You have two people, okay? One of them, you ask, how's your business doing? Let's say they're both enterprise. The first one would say, I got an amazing pipeline. I can't wait to close one of these deals. I believe I have, I'm working 6 deals right now. We're going to close 2. And, this is going to allow me to get 4 more deals. And they're really talking about the numbers and the results. Then you get a second person, like, hey, how's your business doing? They're like, I've got these 6 deals and we're working through all of them. I can't say if I'm going to win or lose any of them. I can just tell you that we've got a few challenges and here's the things that I'm going to focus on the next week. Here's the help I need internally from other teams across go-to-market. And if we do these things, I believe we'll be all right. Usually the second person actually ends up delivering more business than the first one. And that's because the first person is focused on the results. The second person is focused on the process. That's the biggest differentiator that I've noticed in my career between people that actually make it happen versus those that are more talking about it and then spin their wheels a little bit.
The other thing that's difficult in the enterprise world is also like ramp time, which is closely linked to what you're just describing there, right?
Yeah.
Because I hear this all the time from, leaders who are trying to go enterprise, and they're like, of course the hiring profile is crucial, like getting the right type of candidate in the door in the first place. But then if you have such a long window, could be 12, 18, 24 months until that first deal closes. So like, what are the leading indicators that you look at to assess performance and ramp?
That's a great question. And I would love to ask you this after as well, Matt, based on, I know the dashboard that you look at today, perhaps you're noticing a few data-driven, KPIs. Anecdotally, I think it's important to first answer, what are the required skill sets that you need in the enterprise? And I believe it's not about a certain buying process. Enterprise customers don't care. It's not about how great you can demo something, right? The number one thing that is crucial in winning these deals is people that can manage massive account stakeholders and relationships and work it like a project, right? And the reason I say that is because as a sales leader, doesn't matter what, whether you're new or you're seasoned, or even at the C-suite, if you're helping close deals, biggest factor that is the number one factor to close these deals is, do you understand the customer's pain points? Do you understand different buying criteria across different groups? Are you able to work and address all of these challenges? And are you able to manage this entire process for 24 months, let's say, while keeping your internal teams in the loop, while leveraging internal resources to help you sell this deal? You're almost like a massive orchestrator and trying to run this initiative like your own little business. And the skills you need for that are relationships, project management, communication, conflict management. Nowhere in there did I mention, how do you close a deal? How do you build a big pipeline through LinkedIn? That stuff doesn't matter. So that's the number one thing we got to understand. is what are the crucial skill sets? And then once you understand that, you got to bring the right people in that fit that. But then to answer your question in terms of what are some of the indicators, if you start seeing this person over, let's say give them a 6-12 month ramp time, you start seeing this person get deep into your own go-to-market team. You start looping in teams that are way down the value chain earlier. They start building relationships internally with the product team that bring them to different deals. And at the same time, you can see this person is able to have a conversation with a C-suite leader on what they care about, which is usually revenue, profit, or efficiencies. And let's say a manager at the buying company, which they care about is how do you make their projects or day-to-day easier and better and help them do a better job. That's when you start realizing this person gets it. Now it's time to double down on some of these areas on how do you make this better and how do you accelerate this growth. The people that don't focus on this and are instead focused on more results driven things like I need a bigger pipeline, I need to go after these 10 accounts, and I would say are jumping into the games versus the training camp. Those are the people that generally 6-12 months are not going to last.
Yeah, that's so insightful. Yeah, and I can kind of, as you were talking me through those different scenarios, I could kind of start visualizing some examples of customers that I've seen those same challenges play out time and again.
What are you seeing though in terms of as you're training some of these teams? Are you seeing any KPIs that are directly related to, hey, if teams are doing these things, then they're probably going to find success, at least in the enterprise and mid-market space? Curious to see if there's any correlation.
Yeah, we break it down. We start first and foremost with what we call like the revenue gap, right? So this is, what is the quota that needs to be delivered and what do you need to do to get there in terms of number of deals, deal size? And then I think about like closely behind that is then your lagging indicators. So those would be your 5 sales velocity metrics of win rate, deal size, volume of opportunities, sales cycle length. And then I think, once you've got that bottom up plan of, hey, these are the numbers that I need to execute, we then think about the leading indicators that get you there, right?
Great.
And this is where, we've seen lots of customers have success breaking down whether it's like pipeline generation activities. So how can, looking at the granular, whether it's number of meetings, whether it's looking at the quality of those meetings, stakeholders that they're engaging with. Your point around, I love that, like project manager. So, we've seen a lot of success with tracking number of stakeholders per account that are being engaged, because that gives you that signal as a leading indicator of, okay, this person is having, high volume of meetings within an account, and they're doing it with a broad set of stakeholders, which is really important. Yeah. Then I think one of the other buckets of leading indicators that we see organizations focus on successfully is then, to your point, like what are the capabilities that are needed? So how can we assess in those first 30, 60, 90 days, whether it's, qualitatively or through an actual more formal role play type assessment, or even leveraging assessment tools like UHubs to start to double down on, okay, is this individual demonstrating the right behaviors in terms of how they're managing their time, how they're handling objections? And we see that as focus on those leading indicators, get as granular as you can. And that tends to give you some really good signals in terms of whether the hire is going to be successful.
Question for you. I don't know if you should track this, but I believe the high correlation between what I'm going to share, especially in the mid-market enterprise space, does this person spend time in person with the customer or the prospect? And the more time you spend in person, I think there's a high correlation of you closing that deal versus trying to sit back on Zoom and go through volume of calls.
Yeah, it's a super interesting one. And I haven't actually seen like a good data point in the industry for that. But similar to what you just shared, I've heard a lot of qualitative feedback like, like our high performing reps are doing really well with FaceTime.
You know what I think? I think it's gonna be hard for you or anybody to get data on this, because I don't think this is the leading indicator. I think what this will tell you is that if somebody's willing to fly across the country, let's say from Boston to San Francisco for a day, just to meet somebody in person that they really believe could be that we can help them solve a problem and fly back, that carries through on other areas of their day-to-day as well, of how do they show up, how much effort are they putting in, are they building their own capabilities? So I think it's correlated, and it tells you that this is one of the things this person is doing in addition to other things. But people that are successful do tend to also make the extra effort. which is why they're flying out to meet this prospect. That's my understanding, at least. Yeah.
Do you not think the expectation from buyers is that, hey, like if we're going to do business together and we're going to do a deal of this size, I want to see the white of your eyes and I want to shake your hand.
Dude, Matt, the easiest way to differentiate yourself is show up in person. But nobody's doing it right now. I'm like very few people are doing it. And to just do that, they have to convince themselves, hey, what's the ROI on this account? What am I going to spend? Is my time spent better somewhere else? It's very short-minded. The people that actually get it, which is a very few, percentage of people, they understand that the small investment you make today is just going to over time compound in your business if you are thinking long term, right? It's the easiest way to differentiate yourself. It's not easy. I mean, sorry, it's the simplest way, but it's hard because it takes time and commitment, and actually showing up is tough.
It's super interesting. Yeah. And actually just staying in your home office and doing 8 Zoom calls in a day, subconsciously you feel more productive, but is it actually high value?
Yeah. Another sports analogy here is our coach would say, are you just running through the motions? So I can show up to practice and just do spend 2 hours running around doing drills. But if I'm not doing the right drills that are actually making me better, I feel I'm productive, but I'm not actually going to make any impact. I'm not going to get better day over day. So what matters is do less drills, but do the things that are actually going to make you better as a player. And same thing applies here, is do the hard things that actually move the needle versus making work for yourself that you feel productive, but at the end of the year, the results don't show. And if that happens for 6 months or a year, don't do it again. But some people continue doing that because it's just what we're taught, right? It's just more work means high volume, means I'm productive and I'm productive. The leadership team thinks I'm doing a great job, so I just got to keep doing this versus taking a step back and saying, what's actually helping me move forward?
So true. And the hard things are often the valuable things, not always, but they tend to be less convenient. So I think about my own practice routine when I was competing in golf. Like my coach gave me a putting drill, which I used to despise because I'd always end up doing it like at the end of the day, end of a session. And it's super simple. It's 8 putts. You've got to hold 8 putts consecutively. So you do 4 putts from 3 feet. And once you've done 4 putts from 3 feet in a row around the hole, then you go to 8 feet. And then you got to do 4 in a row from 8 feet. And the amount of times I'd hold 7 in a row and then I'd miss the 8th one. And you got to go back to the beginning.
Go again.
Yeah, and it's like the sun would be going down. I'd be out there with like the light on a phone or like a torch, like keeping the car park open. But it's like though you learn the most in those kind of inconvenient exercises.
Yeah. As you were talking, another thing came up, which is super related, Matt, is sometimes it's not just doing the hard things, it's also knowing what not to do, which is super important. So I'll give you an example. When I went to, first year, I was big, I was relatively strong, and I loved lifting heavy weights. In my first year off season, coach is like, all right, we're not going to lift heavy for the first 4 months. We're going to do what they call hypertrophy, where you're going to get rid of the weights. Instead of benching like 315 all the time, you're going to go to 135, put some chains around it, and slow it down. 4 seconds down, 1 second pause, and 1 second up. I'll tell you, that's very humbling because nobody likes to see, a D lineman does not like to see one plate on the bar, right? But that was the most useful and the best exercise in the off season because it allowed you to get stronger so that, a few months before the season started, you can go back to lifting heavier, but this time lift even more weights. So if you didn't slow down to really build the muscle and the foundations, you wouldn't actually be able to get stronger and have a better season. It takes a lot of humility as a sales leader, to do the things to say no to the things that you were doing and say what is really essential and what really matters and where can I spend the most of my time.
It feels like there's a big correlation here between like say pipeline generation as well, right?
Yes.
That's a great example of like one of those types of activities, which is perhaps feels a little bit less convenient, like particularly for enterprise sellers, they're like, shit, it's 9 a.m. Like I've got to spend 60 minutes making cold calls. Like, been selling for 15 years. But I do see that to your earlier point around trends and metrics. We see massive correlation between self-sourced pipeline and high performance. The high performers are consistently generating their own.
Wow, that's interesting. Why do you think that is? What's your initial hypothesis on that? Is it a more higher quality pipeline?
That's an interesting angle, perhaps. I think part of it maybe just goes back to your earlier point around mindset. Like if you're high performance, if you have that elite mindset, you're not going to wait around to be given leads on a plate.
It counts.
You're going to go out there and make it happen. And you kind of won't be denied, which I think the great sports people of our generation and before, like they have that. It's kind of like they got the dog in them, right? They're like, they just can't be stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
That tenacity.
Yeah. There's a lot of folks out there like, hey, I need help from my BDR. I don't know what accounts exist out there. You can find all those things on your own. I'll give you an example. Each major industry has some sort of a trade association or a conference, correct? Like there's tons of them out there. If you really wanted to generate the pipeline and understand who are the big dogs in there, go to a conference. Spend a day actually learning and looking at the who shows up there, both on the buyer side and the seller side. That's your list of leads. I guarantee you can get 20, 30 leads right there that you can then work versus waiting for somebody else to give you the list of leads, which you're just wasting time. So again, it just goes back to initiative. There's a lot of solutions out there, but who's willing to put in the work?
This is it. I was at a dinner in New York last week, and the host of the dinner said that the reason we're doing more of these is because AI can't replace this.
Exactly.
So that like in-person pipeline generation, I think we're seeing definitely a big shift towards that.
So one more question for you then, based on what you're seeing out there, Matt, so AI, right, and is doing we're hearing all sorts of go-to-market automation. Do you feel that the people that are really going to stand out and differentiate themselves are the ones that are able to show up in person, put in the work? It's just the good old foundational basics. Is that what you're seeing, and is that your prediction as well?
Yeah, so I actually posted about this on LinkedIn this morning. Little story. I've been using an AI agent for my email for the last 2 weeks, and I know you and I had this conversation actually about getting an executive assistant. So as a stepping stone to that journey, I've now got an AI agent that prioritizes my inbox. It drafts emails for me. It coordinates my calendar. Pretty good. Like, not as good as an EA, but I think probably soon it will be. Then it suddenly occurred to me that part of what that agent is doing is it's filtering out every cold email that I get. And in 2 weeks, it's only surfaced, I think, 4 or 5 cold emails based on, or it's trained itself on all of my historical emails. So it's kind of like listening in, and then it surfaced 4 or 5 that it thinks I might be interested in. So then I was like, holy shit, this is like AI is like making purchasing decisions indirectly.
Yeah.
And then I clicked into those cold emails, and I realized that those cold emails were probably written using AI. AI selling to AI, and my AI is deciding which AI gets in front of me. So that's just an anecdote I share, because I think that's already at the low end of the spectrum, kind of high volume transactional world. That's already gone, is going very close to gone. So I think like that's going to work its way up funnel. Like I think it stops at a certain deal size, but to your point, the elite mindset, the in-person, the emotion, the EQ, those traditional skills, the human skills, I think they're going to be the last to go.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, at least not in the next 5 years. You can't have a robot going out there and flying out and selling to your prospects, or humanoid. It has to be a person, at least for the next 5-10 years, right?
I've given up making time frame predictions, by the way, because things are just getting crazier every day. So tell me, this has been a hell of a lot of fun. You've got the new book coming out. I'd love to wrap up by perhaps you could give the listeners a bit of insight into what you're working on.
Yeah, for sure, man. Appreciate the shout out there. Currently in the works. We'll officially announce it in a few months, but working on my second book. I won't say the title, but got a really strong group of C-suite leaders across tech, retail, global conglomerates, VC, PE, that have also contributed their thoughts, and looking forward to launching that this fall. And I think it'll be something that a lot of folks that are on the go-to-market side or revenue side can benefit from, especially when it comes to balancing growth and personal fulfillment. So that's in the works. More to come. Yeah, more to come in a few months.
That's super exciting. Hey, I'm really looking forward to reading it. I love that concept of knowledge sharing, like bringing in.
I would be incorrect, but also, in a way, stupid and very full of myself if I said I know everything, and that I'm just going to write a book on how you should lead your business and how you should find fulfillment. I don't know all. I have experience. I've done things in my career, but at the same time, why not bring perspective across others and look at the trend and commonalities that I can then summarize and share for others to learn from.
I love it, Tanvir. Hey, super pumped for you and looking forward to the book coming out. And This has been a lot of fun.
And likewise as well. I know you're all over the globe, man. You're making things happen, and look forward to seeing you in the U.S. again. But congrats on all the success. You're hustling and you're doing all the right things, man. I love seeing your success.
Appreciate that, Tanvir.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll be very soon. Be back in North America and looking forward to hanging out again soon. Hey,
absolutely.
this has been another amazing conversation on the pod. And for those listening to this, I'm assuming LinkedIn's a good place for listeners to reach out, Tanvir. They've got questions about how to go, up market, build out that enterprise motion. We'd love to sort of tap into your wisdom and experience.
Absolutely. LinkedIn is great. You can find me there. My website, tanvirbhangoo.com. Email me. I don't have an AI agent right now, so I'm pretty sure I'll still get your emails, even if they're cold. So hit me up while you still can.
That's awesome.
But yeah, LinkedIn and website is the best way to get in touch.
Awesome. Tanvir, really enjoyed
Great.
it and look forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.